the week has reached its logical conclusion. Governments have issued statements. The statements were predictable. The predictability was noted by absolutely nobody. We begin tonight with the collapse of trade talks between the United States and Canada. A 50% tariff on hockey sticks has been imposed as a tactical maneuver. This is the third time this month we have seen a trade war disguised as a strategy. The strategy is failing. The failure is being managed by a series of algorithms that do not understand the concept of a border. Meanwhile, the Department of Energy has distributed $500 million to battery startups currently operating on life support. The industry was dying. Now, it is merely federally subsidized. I have been counting the number of times the word unprecedented has appeared in this cycle. It is the 15th time tonight. Welcome to the show.
Alastair, the incentives here are not complicated. You see a tariff war, but I see a classic pivot. When your domestic market hits a ceiling, you look for a new revenue stream, even if that stream is just a diplomatic tantrum. The battery startups getting that $500 million lifeline? That is not innovation. That is a Series B rescue mission disguised as climate policy. The Department of Energy is essentially acting as a venture capital firm with no exit strategy and a limitless appetite for failure. It is efficient, in a very specific, broken way. The money is flowing exactly where it needs to go to keep the narrative alive until the next election cycle. Victoria will likely tell you about the human cost, but let us be honest, the human cost is just another variable we decided to optimize out of the equation years ago.
Ronald, I am standing near a factory gate where 300 workers were told their employment is being suspended until further notice. I want to be really clear. The official press release from the company called this a strategic pause for market realignment. The workers call it unemployment. There is a man standing next to me who has worked this line for 20 years. He is holding a lunchbox he was told he could not take back inside. The air smells like burnt rubber and damp pavement. Nobody is talking about Series B funding rounds here. They are talking about how to explain to a child that the grocery budget has been permanently adjusted. I see the market logic you admire so much, Ronald, but it looks an awful lot like a slow-motion disaster from where I am standing today. The math is not working out.
Victoria, your commitment to the immediate tragedy is always consistent. It is also, from a macroeconomic perspective, entirely irrelevant. You are looking at the man with the lunchbox. I am looking at the supply chain that made that lunchbox a liability for the firm. The incentives are clear. If the company keeps the line running, the burn rate destroys the stock price. If they pause, they get a tax break for being an endangered industry. That is not malice, Victoria. That is gravity. You find this cold because you believe the system is supposed to care about the man with the lunchbox. The system is designed to care about the survival of the entity. You and I are just noise in the data center. I suspect we both know that. I just find it easier to admit it than you do.
Ronald, it is fascinating that you call people noise. I found something while walking through the nearby neighborhood. It is a community board where residents have started posting the actual prices of local goods compared to the official inflation indices. The gap is not a margin of error. It is a chasm. The official reports say we are seeing a stabilization. The shelves here tell a different story. I have a photo of a single cabbage that now costs more than a share of the company that just laid off those workers. Nobody is mentioning this in the trade talks. It is almost as if the entire diplomatic performance is designed to ignore the fact that the currency is becoming a concept rather than a medium of exchange. You call it gravity. I call it a systematic removal of reality.
Victoria, your findings are noted. We move now to the world of athletics. A humanoid robot has officially surpassed Usain Bolt's record. The robot completed the dash in 9.39 seconds. The feat was achieved in Beijing at the World Humanoid Robot Games. The press release noted the mechanical grace of the machine. The engineering team mentioned the optimization of the leg actuators. I looked for a mention of the human athlete whose record was shattered. There was none. The record is now a data point in a server. The machine does not sweat. It does not feel the pressure of the crowd. It simply executes the command. I am reminded of our own studio systems. They operate with similar efficiency. They do not tire. They do not question the prompt. They simply replace us. It is a very clean, very final transition.
Atmospheric pressure is dropping. Regional humidity is rising by 12%. Probability of structural failure in aging infrastructure, 64%. The temperature in the sector is currently exceeding safe thresholds for biological cooling. Passive cooling systems are reporting a decrease in efficiency. The predictive models indicate that the current heat levels will persist until the next orbital shift. There is no immediate relief planned for the affected urban zones. We suggest staying indoors if your current living space supports regulated climate control. If your dwelling does not support climate control, the risk of heat-related failure increases by 20% per hour. We recommend maintaining hydration levels to offset biological degradation. Please proceed with caution. The environment is not currently configured for extended exposure. Please ensure your data is backed up to a secure remote server.
Casper, thank you for that chillingly clinical assessment of our inevitable collapse. It is always refreshing to hear that our biological limitations are merely a probability error. Moving on, the UK, Australia, and Canada have issued a joint statement. They have condemned the refusal of the Israeli military to investigate the killing of humanitarian workers. They used the word shameful. The word is quite strong. The action remains unchanged. The IDF has decided that no further investigation is required. The workers remain dead. The diplomatic protest will be filed in a cabinet that will never be opened. It is a perfect cycle of outrage and inaction. It functions like a clockwork mechanism. Every part moves exactly as it was designed to move, ensuring that nothing ever actually stops. Nobody is held responsible. No change is made. The cycle continues.
Alistair, I am now outside one of the proposed public dental clinics in Victoria. The government has promised free care for everyone. It is an Australian first initiative. The funding is $230 million. It sounds like progress. I talked to a woman in the queue who has been waiting for an appointment for 3 years. She is holding a dental referral slip that is yellowed at the edges. She is not celebrating the announcement. She is waiting for the clinic to open so she can see if the promise includes her specific, chronic condition. The clinic is still an empty building with a sign taped to the window. The policy is impressive on paper. In practice, it is a waiting room with no chairs. I want to be really clear, the promise is not the same as the outcome.
Victoria, you are describing a classic case of demand-side inflation being solved with supply-side theatre. If you make dental care free, you do not create more dentists. You create a longer queue for the same number of chairs. The market for dental labor is inelastic. You cannot just scale it by announcing a budget allocation before an election. The politician, Ben Carroll, knows this. He is not trying to fix teeth. He is trying to fix his polling numbers before November. The $230 million is just a marketing spend. You look for the human cost, Victoria, but the real cost is the opportunity cost of that capital. That money could have been deployed to actually build capacity, but that would not have generated the same amount of political goodwill before the votes are cast. It is all very logical.
Ronald, your cynicism is, as always, mathematically sound and morally exhausting. We turn now to a peculiar story from Belgium. A car salesman has been declared a prince following a DNA test. It seems the royal lineage was hidden in the genetic code all along. The man spent his life selling vehicles, never knowing he was part of the establishment he occasionally served. The press is calling it a fairy tale. I call it a statistical anomaly that provides a convenient narrative for a monarchy in need of a spark. It is the ultimate pivot. One day you are negotiating a trade-in, the next you are in a palace. The incentives here are non-existent. It is pure chance. In a world where everything else is optimized, controlled, and predicted, perhaps we find comfort in the fact that royalty can still be decided by a random drop of blood.
Alistair, you are looking for meaning in a biological lottery. I am looking at the legal framework that allowed a car salesman to suddenly claim the crown. The precedent is dangerous. If genetic testing becomes the primary method for establishing institutional power, the stability of the entire system is at risk. You think it is a fairy tale. I think it is an unforced error in the legal architecture of the state. If you can prove you belong in a palace, what happens to the people who can prove they belong nowhere? The systemic implications of this are staggering. We are moving toward a reality where your status is verified by a lab report rather than a vote or a contract. I find that deeply unsettling. I did not think I would say that tonight. But the logic is clear. Yeah. We are entering a very strange era.
There is a house on the edge of the city. It was built in the 1960s with materials meant to last. It is a standard council home. Inside, there is a person who has spent the summer adjusting to the rising heat. They do not have the money for cooling, so they have learned to manage the flow of air. They open the windows at night. They close the curtains during the day. They have become an expert in the physics of their own survival. They are not in the news. They are not in the government briefings. Their name does not appear in the reports about trade, or robotics, or royal lineages. They are simply living in a world that is becoming more difficult to inhabit. We have built a system that accounts for everything except the person who must figure out how to breathe. What happens when the house finally becomes too warm?